Freedom is no longer taken away, it is replaced. Across modern economies, choice is presented as abundance, more brands, more platforms, more paths, but the structure beneath them narrows quietly. The options multiply while outcomes converge. The freedom feels real because it is experienced daily. The control remains invisible because it is systemic. This is not a collapse, it is a refinement. Modern capitalism does not need force, it needs belief. Belief that selection equals agency. Belief that movement equals progress. The belief that participation equals power. The system does not ask for obedience, it invites preference. Every purchase becomes a vote. Every click becomes a signal. Every decision becomes data. And slowly, the meaning of choice changes shape. What once implied direction now implies compliance. This transformation did not happen suddenly. It could not. Systems that endure learn to move slowly. They replace confrontation with comfort. They replace coercion with convenience. In earlier economic eras, power was visible. Factories were owned by identifiable families. Banks were tied to cities. Capital had faces. Decisions created friction because authority was traceable. That traceability created resistance. Workers knew where value flowed. Citizens understood who benefited. Governments could point to institutions and intervene, even imperfectly. Conflict was messy, but it was legible. Modern systems learned from that friction. They studied it, and then they redesigned around it. The new architecture does not remove choice, it fragments it. Instead of one employer, there are many platforms. Instead of one lender, there are countless products. Instead of one narrative, there are endless stories. Each choice feels personal. Each outcome feels individual. Responsibility becomes private, risk becomes internalized, and accountability dissolves into abstraction. At first, this appeared liberating. Flexibility replaced stability. Customization replaced standardization. Markets promised to adapt to the individual, but systems adapt faster than people. Choice, once a tool to escape dependency, became the mechanism through which dependency was distributed. The worker no longer confronts a company. They confront an interface. The consumer no longer negotiates value. They accept terms. The citizen no longer challenges policy. They optimize within constraints. Every decision becomes a micro-adjustment inside a pre-built corridor. History offers a pattern here. When industrial capitalism matured, it faced a problem of scale. Centralization produced efficiency, but also visibility. Visible power attracts opposition. So the system began to decentralize appearances while centralizing control. Ownership spread across markets. Risk was securitized. Decision-making was automated. What emerged was not chaos, but managed dispersion. The illusion of choice depends on this dispersion. When responsibility is everywhere, it is nowhere. Financial products multiplied. Credit became accessible. Debt became normalized. Individuals were told they were being empowered. In reality, they were being enrolled. Enrollment is different from coercion. It feels voluntary. It feels earned. A credit score is not imposed, it is built. A market profile is not assigned, it is accumulated. Participation itself becomes the proof of consent. This is where modern capitalism becomes psychologically efficient. The system no longer needs to convince people that it is fair. It only needs them to believe it is navigable. As long as movement exists, stagnation can be reframed as misnavigation. If outcomes differ, the explanation is choice. This reframing changes how failure is understood. Structural limits become personal shortcomings. Systemic extraction becomes individual miscalculation. The market remains neutral. Only the participant errs. This narrative stabilizes the system more effectively than force ever could. Historically, markets required trust to function. Trust in currency. Trust in institutions. Trust in enforcement. Today, markets require belief. Belief that the next choice corrects the last one. Belief that optimization is always possible. Belief that exit is available, even if never taken. The presence of options replaces the reality of leverage. In many modern economies, labor markets illustrate this perfectly. Workers are told they can leave. They are told they can switch. They are told they can choose, and technically they can, but each alternative exists within the same wage structures, the same cost pressures, the same debt obligations. Mobility exists without escape. This is not accidental. Systems that depend on participation cannot allow mass exit. They must simulate freedom without enabling departure. Choice becomes a pressure valve. The system does not collapse under dissatisfaction because dissatisfaction is redirected inward. People do not ask why outcomes are constrained, they ask how to perform better within them. Over time, this produces a disciplined population without overt discipline. The most effective control is the one that feels like self-direction. Financialization accelerated this process. When value moved from production to instruments, the economy became harder to read. Profits no longer correlated directly with output. Risk no longer stayed where it was created. Complexity protected power. As financial systems grew, they stopped explaining themselves. They no longer needed to. Complex systems do not seek understanding, they seek participation. If enough people engage, the system sustains itself regardless of comprehension. This is why modern financial crises feel abstract until they arrive personally. The architecture is distant, the impact is immediate. Choice plays a role even here. When markets expand, individuals are offered more ways to participate. When markets fail, individuals are told they participated incorrectly. The system survives by preserving its neutrality. Neutrality is not absence of design. It is the appearance of inevitability. When no one feels responsible, the structure feels natural. Modern capitalism presents itself as an environment rather than a system. Like weather, like gravity, you do not argue with it. You adapt. This environmental framing makes critique feel naive. Opposition appears unrealistic. Alternatives appear childish. Choice exists only within the environment, never outside it. Over time, even imagination becomes bounded. People stop asking what could be built. They ask what can be optimized. This is the quiet success of the system. It does not need loyalty. It needs routine. Daily choices anchor people to structures they rarely see. Every subscription renews belief. Every loan reinforces commitment. Every adjustment deepens entanglement. Exit remains theoretical. The system understands this psychology well. It knows that people tolerate constraints if they believe it is temporary, if they believe improvement is one decision away. So the system ensures that improvement is always adjacent, never arrived. Progress is perpetually deferred. Historically, freedom implied the ability to refuse to withdraw labor, to withhold participation. Modern systems reinterpret freedom as the ability to choose between offerings. Refusal becomes irrational, withdrawal becomes self-harm. The individual internalizes the system's priorities. This internalization is reinforced culturally, but culture is not the source. The source is incentive alignment. When survival depends on participation, participation becomes virtue. This alignment stabilizes inequality without announcing it. Differences in outcome appear deserved. Differences in access appear earned. The structure disappears behind performance metrics. Data strengthens this illusion. Algorithms do not argue, they calculate. When decisions are mediated by systems that appear objective, authority feels impersonal. No one is responsible for the outcome. The model decided, but models are trained on histories, and histories encode power. The past is not neutral, yet it becomes the foundation of future choices. This is how inequality persists without intent. The system does not need to discriminate, it only needs to remember. Choice becomes predictive rather than expressive. People are not asked what they want. They are shown what they are likely to choose. Preference is guided, not forced. This guidance feels helpful. It reduces friction. It increases efficiency. But efficiency is not freedom. Efficiency optimizes movement within a path. Freedom allows the path to be questioned. Modern capitalism optimizes paths relentlessly. Supply chains become invisible. Labor becomes modular. Consumption becomes seamless. Seamlessness is a design goal because it reduces awareness. Friction invites thought. Convenience invites repetition. Repetition creates habit. Habit creates stability. Stability protects the system. At no point is choice removed. It is simply shaped. People choose faster. They choose more often. They choose with less context. Volume replaces deliberation. This is not accidental, it is scalable. Large systems cannot rely on reflection. They rely on throughput. The more decisions made, the less each one matters. Responsibility fragments. No single choice feels significant enough to resist. This is how systems endure. They dilute agency across millions of moments. The individual feels active. The structure remains untouched. Over time, dissatisfaction grows, but it lacks direction. People feel constrained but cannot locate the source. They blame themselves. They blame timing. They blame circumstance. The system remains intact. Historically, power feared awareness. Now it absorbs it. Critique becomes content. Dissent becomes a market segment. Even resistance becomes a choice, and choices once again are monetized. This is the depth of the illusion. The system does not suppress alternatives, it hosts them. As long as they remain contained within the marketplace of options, they pose no threat. Everything becomes selectable, nothing becomes transformative. The presence of choice pacifies demand for change. Why disrupt a system when you can customize your experience within it? This question does not need to be asked. It is implied. The system does not argue for itself. It simply continues. And as long as choices remain available, it appears justified. This is where the illusion becomes self-sustaining. People defend the system not because it is fair, but because it is familiar. Familiarity creates trust. Trust creates compliance, not forced compliance, voluntary alignment. The most stable systems are those that are never experienced as systems at all. They are experienced as reality. And reality, once internalized, does not feel imposed. It feels chosen. Once reality feels chosen, questioning it feels ungrateful. Modern capitalism does not need to prove its legitimacy. Legitimacy is inferred from participation. If millions engage, the structure must be valid. If billions comply, the design must be natural. This circular logic closes a system. People rarely notice the moment when choice stops being empowering and starts being compulsory. There is no clear threshold, no announcement, only a gradual tightening of consequences. Early choices are reversible, later ones are not. A subscription can be cancelled, a mortgage cannot. A platform can be left, a credit history cannot. Commitment accumulates silently, each decision narrows the next. This narrowing is framed as adulthood, as responsibility, as maturity. Stability becomes indistinguishable from entrapment. The system relies on time to do its work. Short horizons feel flexible. Long horizons feel inevitable. By the time constraint is felt, it is already normalized. History shows that systems do not need to deny freedom if they can delay its cost. People will trade tomorrow for comfort today, especially when tomorrow feels abstract. Modern economies specialize in abstraction. Future risk is priced, packaged, and deferred. Present convenience is delivered immediately. Choice is offered at the point of reward, never at the point of consequence. This asymmetry sustains participation. People do not reject systems that reward them quickly and punish them slowly. The delay is the design. This is why crises feel surprising even when they are predictable. The warning signs exist, but they are distant, distributed. Technical daily life feels stable until it does not. When instability arrives, it is framed as external, a shock, an anomaly, a once-in-a-generation event. The system remains blameless. Choice re-enters the narrative here as well. People are told they made poor decisions, they overextended, they misjudged risk, they failed to plan. Structural exposure is personalized. This personalization prevents collective interpretation. If failure is individual, reform is unnecessary. The system survives intact. In earlier eras, economic failure was often communal. Factories closed, industries collapsed, cities declined. The visibility of loss created political pressure. Modern systems isolate loss, failure is atomized. A default is a personal tragedy, not a structural signal. A market crash is a temporary correction, not an indictment. Choice absorbs blame. The individual becomes the shock absorber. This absorption allows volatility to increase without destabilizing the system. Risk does not disappear. It from institutions to individuals, from balance sheets to households, from public debate to private anxiety. This relocation is presented as empowerment. People are told they have more control, more options, more autonomy. What they have is more exposure. Exposure without leverage. Leverage remains concentrated where choice is least visible. Large institutions do not experience choice the same way individuals do. They design menus rather than select from them. They influence standards rather than adapt to them. They shape environments rather than navigate them. This asymmetry is rarely discussed because it is obscured by scale. When many people choose among few options, the illusion feels complete. Volume creates legitimacy. If millions accept the terms must be reasonable. This logic ignores alternatives that never appear. Invisible choices do not count. The system does not need to hide them, it simply does not present them. What is not offered is rarely demanded. Imagination contracts to fit available selections. This contraction happens gradually. People stop envisioning different arrangements. They focus on optimizing outcomes within existing ones. Ambition replaces imagination. Efficiency replaces inquiry. Over time, this produces a population skilled at navigation but untrained in questioning. The system prefers navigators. Navigators move smoothly. They adapt quickly. They blame themselves when progress stalls. Questioners introduce friction. Friction slows throughput. Throughput is the lifeblood of large systems. Everything that interrupts flow is reframed as inefficiency. Doubt becomes delay. Resistance becomes irrationality. Refusal becomes extremism. Choice becomes the acceptable form of dissent. If you dislike a product, choose another. If you dislike a job, apply elsewhere. If you dislike a platform, switch. Each alternative exists within the same architecture. Dissatisfaction circulates without accumulating force. This circulation is stabilizing. It allows pressure to dissipate. Historically, pressure produced rupture. Rupture produced change. Modern systems engineer circulation instead. Energy moves, but does not concentrate. This is why inequality can expand without revolt. People are busy adjusting expenses, adjusting expectations, adjusting timelines. Adjustment becomes a lifestyle. The promise of eventual stability keeps participation alive. Someday becomes the most powerful word in the system. Someday debt will decrease, someday income will rise, someday freedom will feel real, someday never arrives. But as long as it feels plausible, the system holds. This plausibility is reinforced culturally, but culture is secondary. The foundation is structural. Incentives reward patience, penalties punish disruption. Those who endure are praised, those who exit are marginalized. Exit is framed as failure. Staying becomes virtue. Choice loses its oppositional meaning. It no longer represents the ability to refuse. It represents the ability to endure. This is a profound shift. Freedom becomes resilience rather than autonomy. People are celebrated for surviving systems, not for changing them. Survival stories replace structural critique. The system absorbs admiration without scrutiny. Even transparency serves this function. Data dashboards, performance metrics, financial disclosures, information increases, but understanding does not. Complexity shields accountability. When systems are too intricate to grasp, trust replaces comprehension. Trust is cheaper than understanding. People do not need to know how things work if they believe they work. Belief stabilizes participation. This belief is reinforced by constant motion. Markets move, prices fluctuate. News cycles refresh. Movement suggests vitality. Stasis would invite inspection. As long as something is happening, the system appears alive. This constant motion also exhausts attention. People do not have time to analyze structures when they are managing responses. Reaction replaces reflection. Choice accelerates this pace. More options require faster decisions. Faster decisions reduce deliberation. Reduced deliberation favors existing pathways. The familiar wins. Innovation is celebrated rhetorically but constrained structurally. True alternatives threaten stability. Acceptable innovation improves efficiency without altering power flows. The system evolves without transforming. This distinction matters. Change that preserves hierarchy is encouraged. Change that redistributes agency is resisted. Choice is offered generously in the first category and sparingly in the second. Most people never encounter the second category. They do not know it exists. This ignorance is not enforced. It is incidental. Systems do not need secrecy when complexity suffices. The illusion of choice thrives in complexity. People assume that if alternatives existed, they would be visible. They trust the market to reveal options. They forget that markets reveal what is profitable to reveal. Profitability shapes visibility. Visibility shapes perception. Perception shapes belief. Belief shapes behavior. The chain closes. This is how modern capitalism maintains stability without appearing rigid. Flexibility becomes its camouflage. Adaptability becomes its defense. The system is never wrong. It merely adjusts. When outcomes worsen, the narrative shifts. The economy is changing. Skills must update. Expectations must recalibrate. The burden of adaptation falls downward. Those with the least capacity to absorb change are asked to absorb the most. Choice is cited as justification. They could have prepared, they could have pivoted, they could have chosen differently. This language is powerful because it feels reasonable. It aligns with lived experience. People do make choices. The system does not deny this. It relies on it. By focusing attention on decisions, it deflects attention from design. Design disappears behind agency. Agency becomes the story. Stories stabilize belief. As long as people narrate their lives through choices, the system remains invisible. Invisibility is the ultimate protection. What cannot be seen cannot be confronted. What cannot be confronted cannot be changed. Modern capitalism understands this intuitively. It does not silence critics. It surrounds them with options. It does not forbid alternatives. It prices them out. It does not crush dissent. It reframes it as preference. Everything becomes personal. Nothing becomes political. This depoliticization is not ideological. It is procedural. When systems operate through individual transactions, collective interpretation fades. People experience outcomes alone. Alone they adapt. Together they might question. The system ensures solitude. Not physical solitude, but interpretive solitude. Everyone manages their own risks, their own debts, their own failures. Shared language erodes. Without shared language, shared action is impossible. Choice fragments narrative. Each person tells a different story. The system remains the same. This is the illusion at its deepest level. Choice does not free individuals from systems. It binds them to systems more intimately. Every decision reinforces the architecture. Participation becomes maintenance. The system does not need defenders. It has users. Users protect what they rely on, even when it harms them. This is not irrational. It is human. People protect the structures that give their struggles meaning. Without the system, effort feels wasted. So the system persists, quietly, efficiently, without confrontation. And as long as choice remains visible, freedom feels intact. Even when it is not, the illusion does not collapse. It settles, like a truth that no longer shocks, only remains.